Hi everyone, welcome to the MrpTech podcast. This is episode 144. My name is Matt from mrptechreviews.com. Thanks again for joining me this week as I review Ubuntu 19.04 and I tell you all of my thoughts on this recent release of Ubuntu this week. Before I get into that, boy, I had a really great week last week. It was a nice long vacation, and boy, I tell you, when I have a chance to not have an hour commute to and from work every week, I can really get a lot of stuff done. And I spent a lot of time last week working on a lot of small projects that I just sort of accumulated over time. I think I mentioned in last week's show that I got my Plex server back up and running, managed to work through an issue with my Nextcloud server, and I sort of just dabbled for most of the week with small projects. And one of the things that I came across is let me take a step back. At least 5 or 6 years ago, I was in a really big routine of backing up all of my data, storing that data off-site so it was a real backup. And one of the things that I did is I sort of had I had some hard drives, external hard drives, and made 2 or 3 different copies and then stored them in a super secret offsite location. And if you're going to do that, make sure you remember where you put them, when they're in a safe spot where they're not going to be taken. And back then I did that. So one of the things that I did is I had some drives and I stored at my parents' house for a while. And well, let's say every once in a while I would go and I would update those drives, update the backups, and it seemed to work fine for a while until all of a sudden the drives disappeared and I had no idea what happened to them. Were they misplaced? Were they lost? Who knows what happened to them? Well, oddly enough, most of the time it's probably your own fault when something like that happens. And so I figured that all this time there was probably a very high percentage that I actually misplaced the drives and nobody else misplaced them. And it turns out that I did. I misplaced these drives for a good 5 years and had no idea what happened to them. And I had an idea where they might be, just never got a chance to get to a specific bin that I had put them in. And just took about a few minutes as actually, going and looking for them, and sure enough, I had found them back at my house, not at my parents' house. And so yeah, apparently when I updated the drives, I just never brought them back, and so I sort of had access to some files that I haven't had or seen for years and years, and caused me to go on a whole tangent of creating new backups and organizing things that I hadn't had access to in a few years. So one of the things that I did, I went through and backed up all of my systems that I have in the rare chance that something does happen. I've got fresh backups for everything. A lot of my stuff I have in multiple places anyway, so these drives weren't really all that important, but there was a few things on there from grad school that I had that I really want to keep, and so it was nice to actually finally get them back in my hands. The biggest thing I think was my DVD backup files, and I had them stored on one of these drives, and apparently when I had backed up my DVD files, I had actually moved everything from one drive to another drive and not copied them and pasted them. So that was a little rough for a while, not having access to that. So I've been messing around this week with Ubuntu 19.04 as well. And in last week's show, I mentioned the fact that I went through my top 5 favorite Linux distros, and Ubuntu was at number 5 on my list. And I had said a couple of things that I want to reiterate in this show. So when I first started using Linux, I started with Ubuntu, and Ubuntu has always gotten me very excited because every 6 months or so, there is a new release of Ubuntu. And with that, there are slow and steady increments. But for the last few years, it seems that at least from Ubuntu 12.04 to Ubuntu 16.10, there wasn't a whole lot of change until Ubuntu dropped the Unity desktop in favor of returning back to the GNOME desktop environment. And honestly, I haven't ran Ubuntu in a while, except for one of the machines that we have at school here in our EdTech Center is an exact duplicate of my setup. It's a System 76 Gazelle. And when I purchased my laptop, I purchased it with Pop! OS installed in it. And when I purchased one for our school EdTech Center, I purposely purchased it with Ubuntu 18.04. And the performance between the two of them is very similar. Obviously, Pop! OS is based off Ubuntu. And so running basically the same version, just a few tweaks in Pop! OS that I happen to enjoy a little bit more than stock Ubuntu. So what I have done in the last week is I have tested Ubuntu in a virtual machine and on physical hardware. And I want to go through some of my first impressions with Ubuntu. So the first thing that came to mind, the install is easy as always. For a first-time Linux user, it is very simple to get Ubuntu up and running. Always has been, for the last, 10 years or whatever at least. But I did notice some polish right away with Ubuntu. That's the first thing that I noticed. And in my opinion, at first glance, not a whole lot changed with Ubuntu, but I did notice some very nice theme changes. And I think right away, the new theme, the Yarrow theme, was, I think, first introduced in Ubuntu 18.10, but it wasn't like a whole system-wide thing. There was certain applications that really didn't blend well with the rest of the theme. But now in Ubuntu 19.04, the Yarrow theme seems to be system-wide, and it is a really elegant theme for Ubuntu. The first thing that I noticed was the performance in Ubuntu under GNOME. And with Ubuntu running GNOME 3.32, it seems a whole lot more responsive, seems a whole lot faster. Now, I've got to say that Ubuntu is trying to keep the theme as close to the Unity theme as possible. They have the dock on the left-hand side, very similar to the Unity desktop, but it's now running GNOME instead. With that, I don't really like the way it looks, to be honest. It is much different than a lot of other distros out there, but there's something about the way they have everything set up in GNOME. It's just not my workflow for some reason, but the performance is very much improved from the last couple of versions. The other thing that I noticed as I was booting in to Ubuntu for the first time was a safe graphics mode that I don't remember seeing before. And the safe graphics mode basically will set the boot parameters to no mode set. And if you're having issues with your graphics card by any means, this will let you at least get the system installed, and then you can install the additional drivers needed to get your graphics card working. So this isn't something that's necessarily new, but it does make it easier for people who are using Linux for the first time to get started. You could always set a boot parameter as no mode set before, but this just gives it as an actual option for you when you're actually booting your computer. There is other things that have been added. The Nightlight application is one of the more commonly used that I have been using. As your surrounding gets darker, the screen will adjust as well, so that maybe if you're like me that has a lot of eye strain, it'll actually change the way the screen colors are presented as it gets darker around you. And that's a big thing for me. I always set my desktops very dark. I just can't handle a lot of the brightness coming from the screen itself. New sound controls are very nice. That all has to do with basically the GNOME environment. One of the things that I really kind of was interested in as I was testing Ubuntu 19.04 was after they dropped Unity became a community project, the old Unity desktop. And one of the things that I wanted to do was see how far Unity has come along since it was dropped by Ubuntu. So I installed the Unity desktop environment, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that Unity itself has come a long way, and it's very performant now. It's very quick and speedy. Still not my necessarily favorite. I was a big Unity fan for a long time, and I'm glad to see that it's still around and still being developed. When I used it, it was very slow and it had some issues that it needed to be worked out, some bugs. And it seems to me that Unity is also making very much progress now that it is a community support. So there's a lot of things about Ubuntu that's very appealing to me. One of them being almost the latest Linux 5.0 kernel. I'm not exactly sure what they're up to as far as the Linux kernel goes. I didn't even realize Linux 5 had been released. I don't really follow that all that much, but some of the things that I said in the past about Ubuntu not making progress at a rapid pace, I have to say that the amount of work that went into this release really impressed me. And I know that over the next few releases leading up to the next long-term support release, they're just going to keep plugging away at this. And I really think by April of next year that Ubuntu is going to be almost completely redesigned, and I think it's about time to see that. I can't wait to see what happens over the next year. So here's some other things that I noticed with Ubuntu that, as far as my review goes, I like to stay positive, but there's a couple of things that I don't really understand about Ubuntu, and I understand that they're probably trying to create an all-around system similar to Windows that people can just install and use. Some of the software choices of pre-installed software, I don't really understand. I've never been a fan of having the Amazon apps installed in Ubuntu. And this time around, I've seen things like Solitaire installed. I just really don't understand why that was necessary to have pre-installed. Maybe they just wanted a few games to have, but maybe I'm just being used to creating my own system and putting whatever I want on my system. There's things like Mahjong and Mines that I've never seen in Ubuntu before, and it's possible that they've been in the last few releases, but that to me just gave it a Windows feel to me. You know, I haven't played those games in years, and I don't play Solitaire or Mahjong or the Mine game, and maybe they're trying to be a competitor for Windows, and they're looking, if anybody's looking for a Windows alternative, Ubuntu is a good choice. But and this software is very easily uninstallable, so that's a plus. So it's not like certain Windows software where you can't uninstall it. It's very easy to remove software, so it's really not that big of a deal. And on the other end of that, it's nice to see things like that are consistently in Ubuntu, like Thunderbird, Rhythmbox, Shotwell. Rhythmbox is a alternative to iTunes. Shotwell is like an alternative to any photo archive software that you might use. So it's nice to see those still in Ubuntu. I know for a while there was discussion whether or not Thunderbird was going to be released with Ubuntu or not. I like the fact that Firefox is still installed instead of Google Chrome. So there are things that I like about the software being installed as well. One of my favorite things that I have been sort of playing with in this release is the updated Ubuntu software store, which has also been slowly improving over the last few years. Going back to Ubuntu 16.04, I think that's when changes were starting to be made. It wasn't quite ready as far as my opinion goes, but the new software store is beautiful. It's elegant. It's well laid out. Lots of information for all the different apps. Everything's organized nice and neatly, whether it's games or photography or productivity, science and education, utilities, audio and video. So I'm more familiar now with like the Pop Shop in Pop OS, which is very similar to the Ubuntu software store, and I'm sure they've taken a lot from that. But just all around, it seems like little pieces of polish all through the whole system, really making this look and feel very elegant, which has not really happened in the last few years, in my opinion. One thing that I would love to see is I would love to see this purple and sort of magenta background disappear, and something a little bit more modern, something a little bit more appealing. I just don't like the color scheme. I don't like the oranges in the theme at all. And much of this you could probably change by installing themes, installing your own wallpaper, choosing your own display. But I'm just talking from a very stock point of view as far as using Ubuntu. So all around, I'm really finding myself stretching to find anything to critique about it. The system itself hasn't crashed on me at all. It's stable, just like I would expect Ubuntu to be. And I do give it my recommendation for anybody wanting to try it out there. Just go to ubuntu.com and download the ISO file for either Ubuntu 18.04 or 19.04. Excuse me, 18.04 or 19.04. 18.04 is a long-term support. It's a little bit more dated. It's got support for 5 years. This one is only supported for 9 months because this is part of their incremental release cycle. So they'll work on this, release this, and 6 months they'll have Ubuntu 19.10. And then another 6 months from that, they'll have 20.04, which will be another long-term support release. So really the long-term support is where I recommend most people to be at. So this is going to be probably my last Linux distro review for a little bit. I'm going to move on to some other things over the next few weeks. And one of the things that I want to talk about in next week's show is I will have a date and time specifically for contacting the International Space Station. And I want to get that out to all of you as soon as possible so that you can catch the live stream. I've been talking about it for over a year now. We're getting very close. On April 29th, I am going to be contacted with the exact date and time of Eris contact for my school district. We're going to live stream the whole event from our auditorium. Students will have about 10 minutes or so talking to the astronauts on the International Space Station, but there's a whole setup before that. So the whole thing will probably be, I'm guessing, half an hour or so. I'm going to stream it live on my YouTube channel, the MrpTech Reviews YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to that, go ahead and do that now. So next week I'll have information with that. The week after will be actually the live stream event. It'll be sometime during the week of May 6th. What I am really hoping for is Tuesday, May 7th. But they've given us a bunch of dates, and we had to prioritize what dates and what times worked. We're basically moving around school lunch schedules and arrival times, dismissal times, and really Tuesday, May 7th is the optimal day. I'm fingers crossed that we get that day and time, but I don't want to confirm everything yet. So we'll find out next Monday, next Monday, April 29th. And after that, I'll pass the information on to all of you. For those of you who like to learn about tech, want to talk more tech, I invite you to join in the MrpTech Discord chat room. That you can go to my website, mrptechreviews.com, click the Discord button, and it'll bring you right into our chat room. You're welcome to pop in once. You're welcome to pop in once a day, once an hour, once a week, once a year, whatever you want to do. Come in and say hello and talk tech with some of us. And if you want to learn about technology topics, it'd be a good place to do it. So this group is a wide range of, we've got several different chat set up, from audiobooks to amateur radio to just a general discussion about anything. We also have a Podnuts sort of Linux user group set up there as well. And it's a really fun group, and I invite you all, and any listener, to check out that. The last thing that I want to talk about is I did get an email that I want to read on the show, and I have not had a chance to respond yet. But let me pull up this email here from Pavan. And Pavan says, "Hi, Matt. It's been a while. I really liked your latest podcast. For me, my favorite distro is Ubuntu because of the following reasons. KDE's rapid feature and performance development that keeps happening, but within the stability of Ubuntu. Windows-like UI and theming. The lightness of the desktop environment. KDE is working on future display server technologies such as Wayland. Ubuntu is going to be giving the option to install ZFS file system as root in the 1910 release. That's literally the best file system on the planet. Qt applications are also generally lighter in resources. KDE uses multi-thread processing, unlike GNOME. And he is on the 6-month release cycle." He also goes on to say, "As for your list, I really do agree with most of them. I think my issue with Deepin is that it's based on Debian's unstable branch, which I would have preferred it to be based on Debian testing. Regards, Pavan." So Pavan, thanks for the email. I appreciate it very much. And anybody else who wants to email, just feel free to send me an email, mrptechreviews@gmail.com. And you can talk about anything you want to. Send me feedback for the show, give me show ideas, or just tell me what you think. And so, yeah, Pavan, I totally agree with all of your thoughts here. KDE is something that, to me, has always been really beautiful. It's something that I've been wanting to return to for probably the last 6 or 8 months, whether it's Ubuntu or KDE Neon. I really like the Plasma environment. I do like the idea that it's very similar to Windows, where you have a taskbar at the bottom. I haven't tried it recently, so I don't know how as far as performance is coming. I'm assuming it has come along quite a bit since the last time I tried it. It's been probably a good few years since I've actually sat down and tried to get work done on a KDE experience. I have booted it into a live environment before. Probably just before Christmas, I believe I was thinking of reviewing KDE, but then I got distracted and moved on to something else. I have heard about the ZFS file system coming to 1910. I don't have a lot of experience with ZFS. I hear great things about it. That might be another thing that I want to check out in the future as well. There are some KDE apps that I'm interested in. And I'm always afraid to install GNOME apps on KDE or KDE apps on GNOME. I know a lot of times that things work very well. I've always ran into trouble with dependencies and things like that when I install apps for certain desktop environments. And I just really don't want to muck up my system right now. But maybe in the future I'll dual boot a KDE environment and give it a try. There are some graphics apps like Krita that I want to try and compare to GIMP, that type of thing. So these things kind of are always in the back of my mind, and then at certain points somebody sends an email like this and it gets my mind spinning again. So thanks, Pavan, for sending all of this stuff in. As far as Deepin goes, I want to say that I can't remember if they're actually on the Debian testing anymore or if they're actually on the stable branch now. I'd have to go double check that. As far as I know, they may have switched recently, but I don't want to comment too much on that. I'm going to have to go look that up, and maybe Pavan, I'll send you an email in the future. But that's one thing I really do need to check on. So I totally agree about Deepin Linux, but I honestly haven't really had any problems with it. I've been running it in a VM off and on for probably a little over a month now, and I really haven't had any issues, even if it is on the unstable branch of Debian. So just keep that in mind for you as well, and check it out. I've sort of gone from Deepin to the Deepin desktop on Manjaro, and I really, with either one, I haven't had any issues with either of those. So it could be just it's a little bit more stable, just because I'm not using it full time. I really don't know. But thanks, Pavan, for sending the email in. You got a lot of great insight right there, and I appreciate it. And please feel free, anybody listening to the show. It's more fun when I get to interact with listeners. So feel free to send me any emails, or you can contact me on the website, however you feel most comfortable contacting me. And I will either put your email in the show, or I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. We will see you next time.